America's largest insects are disappearing. From the insects that you used to see in your backyard or on your porch light, to the largest and most cryptic moth in North America, insect populations have been going down. But there's still something that we can do about it. And some of the solutions are actually pretty simple. So what's actually happening to some of our favorite insects? And what does that mean for us? Hey guys, I'm Zachary Gray, and today we're going to be exploring my home state of Louisiana and seeing exactly what's bugging our insects. American insect diversity is currently experiencing a significant decline, with numbers hinting at roughly a 1.5 annual drop in insect abundance, and up to 40% of species are threatened with some level of extinction. And I'm sure over the years, some of you have probably noticed this in one way or another. When I was younger, every year I remember sometime before Christmas seeing tons of buck moths in my backyard. These are a very pretty little black and white moth, and they were one of my favorite insects to see this time of year, as there wasn't a lot of other invertebrate activity in the dead of winter. In fact, many people have noticed certain insects that used to be fairly common where they live going locally extinct, otherwise known as extirpated. Things like fireflies, certain native ant species, and for me, the buck moth. But that doesn't mean that this is the case everywhere. For buck moths, their favorite habitat tends to have large oak trees. So me and Emily decided to go where there is certainly no lack of these impressive trees.
Right now we're in City Park, and we're gonna see if we can get some buck moths. I mean, you've not gotten to see them before. No. So this is your first one. Yep. I wanna film you. I wanna film you chasing one.
Oh Lord.
It was kind of fast.
And wherever these giant oak trees and Spanish moss are dominant, the buck moths are actually still thriving.
Finally got one.
That's a big one. What? You get him? There you go. Good job. Whoa.
Like most insects, these guys require what's called a host plant, a specific species that provides food, shelter, and a place to lay eggs.
This is kind of the state that they're in. Just like lay eggs and then crash. Well, he can fly a little bit, but then he just...
Buck moths feed on oaks and willows mostly, and the moths themselves tend to do really well up and amongst these large oak trees with a lot of these Spanish mosses. Now these moths might not seem that impressive, but just wait until we get to some of the big ones. Now that's just one example of one insect that has a specific habitat requirement, and when that habitat is available, the insect thrives. But sadly, at least where I live, these neat little moths have all but vanished. Now whether that's due to loss of habitat or pesticide usage, I'm not fully sure, but it is a pretty common trend amongst these more suburban areas. Now one that you've probably heard about in recent years is the monarch butterfly. These charismatic and gorgeous animals are probably one of the most well-known butterflies in the US, but they've been in decline for some time now. In fact, since the 80s, they're down by about 80% of their original population, and they've even been proposed as a federally endangered species. While they aren't a protected species just yet, the most important issue facing monarchs is their lack of host plants, specifically milkweeds. As grassland habitat is restored, and as people start planting native plants in their gardens, we'll likely see a huge rebound in monarch population. But once again, you have to keep in mind that is one insect species. Many others go completely unnoticed. And to find some of our more obscure insects, we'd have to head out into the uplands and set up light traps. This is a great way to see lots of really unique insects, especially moths, beetles, and one of my personal favorites, an adult antlion. Now you've probably never seen one of these guys before, but you've likely seen the sand traps that the larvae make. This is why these guys are called antlions. These freaky little predators can often be found in really sandy environments, where they build traps for small insects, primarily ants. Now these insects actually don't need a host plant, but habitat is still a huge factor. Polluted, compacted, or eroded soils just won't do for many of these species. They're a great example of an insect that a lot of people would easily overlook, and most people probably wouldn't notice if they vanished entirely. I also just wanted an excuse to show you guys an antlion, because I think that they're really cool. The Neuroptera, or the nerve-winged insects, are really cool in general, and they're related to another species, the Dobson flies, which are these huge, menacing-looking insects, and both the larva species, antlions and helgramites, are actually really useful environmental indicators, so I find that to be really cool. But what we're really after at the moment are the giant insects. These are the insects that have probably been hit the hardest by light pollution, loss of habitat, and quite frankly, probably your car. Things like giant silk moths, or even the eastern hercules beetle, I usually find these guys dead around gas stations or more urban environments bordering good habitat. And these animals are becoming increasingly harder to find. But there's one giant moth in particular that I've actually noticed more of in recent years.
Well, that is a very nice example of a silk moth. Now this is another saturnid moth, really giant moth. This is about how big they get. They're not as big as the other saturnids out here, so they don't get as big as Polyphemus or cecropia moths, but they're still a very impressive saturnid species. Now this time of year you're going to be seeing these moths flying all around. They oftentimes get hit by cars or crash land into buildings. And you know, it's very unfortunate, but they have a very short lifespan. As you can see, this is a gravid female. She's kind of shaking, her wings are already torn up, and they go for as long as they can. As soon as they turn into a moth, they don't eat another speck of food. They only eat as caterpillars, and then once they turn into a moth, it's all about breeding, laying those eggs, and then unfortunately, like we're seeing here, they tend to kind of slowly fade and die. Whoop. But I guess she's still got a little bit in her.
One of my favorite groups of moths, the saturnids, or the giant silk moths, are probably some of the most impressive insects that North America has to offer. And it's one that we've certainly seen declining in recent years. While they are still overall in decline, there are places where they can be locally abundant.
This is a rosy maple moth. Now these are a saturnid, they are a giant moth species, but as you can see they're a smaller saturnid. They are a smaller giant moth species. They're super colorful and the wings have this kind of light yellowish, almost greenish coloration with those pinks, but the legs on this thing are just like a super dark pink coloration. These are one of my favorite moth species out here, and you'll oftentimes find them around gas station lights. You'll see them out and about, but they're a really good species to come to your bug trap lights at night. Yellow on top is just awesome, and they've got those really big antennae. Now these moths are really fragile. In fact, whenever they crash land into a light, they oftentimes don't make it, but this one looks pretty healthy. She's very active. We're gonna go ahead, let her on her way, keep looking for more, but that is awesome. Little rosy maple moth. Sweet little thing.
They seem to be doing fairly well, or I guess as well as a giant moth that gets hit by cars can be doing. But not all moths are limited by a host plant, and can be in decline for totally different reasons. This giant here is a Polyphemus moth, and it's the second largest moth in North America. It's also a great example of why I never get to finish my moth segments.
But there's another reason that this moth can't... We have witnessed the reason why I can't ever film moths, but she's gonna go off, lay her eggs. I was about to get to... She's so heavy and she's so gravid that she can't even really fly away too well, and sure enough, there she goes. I don't even think I got a single close-up. That's crazy.
Polyphemus moths can use so many host plants that it's not even funny. I mean, here, just look at them all. But they've been hit really hard in recent years by parasites, particularly the invasive European tachinid fly. We introduced this fly into US agricultural fields in 1906 to control the invasive spongy moths, and it's been wreaking havoc on a lot of our native species ever since. But the species that's been hit even harder by these invasive flies is our largest moth species, the cecropia moth. This is North America's largest moth species, and they're one of my favorite moths, probably right after the black witch moth. They mostly feed on large maple trees, particularly sugar maples where I'm from, but I actually see them a lot more on their other common host plant, willows. In fact, my first time ever encountering this species was actually back in kindergarten. During recess, I spotted one of these giant moths right outside of the fence, and honestly, I was probably a menace for the rest of the class day because all I could think about was that giant moth at recess. And I really wanted to go see it closer. Later that day, it was actually still there, so I did get to go see it up close. And it's a good thing I did because I ended up not seeing another one for 11 years. And even with all of my wildlife endeavors, I've still only seen 5 of these moths. Can't say that's a state of decline, maybe I'm just unlucky. But they've certainly been hammered by habitat loss, invasive parasitoids, cars, and everything in between. But they are one of the most stunning insects that we have here, and something that I hope continues to survive for many more years to come. So what can we do to start seeing these incredible insects again and make our native habitats somewhat livable? For starters, putting out host plants is probably the most important way that we can help them out. Planting milkweeds, for example, or other native host plants, even in more urban environments, can certainly be a great way to boost their numbers. But as we saw with the antlions, it's not all just about plants. Oftentimes, improvements in soil and water quality can greatly impact our insects' health. And when we start to see more of this, and this, we'll know that we're on the right track in improving our landscapes and making the world a more pleasant place to live. Thank you for watching.